What's up, everybody? Welcome to On West Gray, the monthly podcast about all things local government in the city of Norman. I'm your host, Tiffany Verska, Chief Communications Officer for the city of Norman, and we appreciate you tuning in. Today, we have a pair of guests with us from the City of Norman's Code Compliance Division, Miss Janita Hatley and Mr. Kelvin Winter. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, code compliance is housed within the Department of Planning and Community Development. This team is responsible for inspecting and enforcing health and safety codes, as well as sign permit application review and processing. Their responsibilities are vast and layered, and many questions or concerns that come in from residents are often sent their way. We're about to learn a little bit more about the ins and outs of what they do right here in the Norman community. But first, big shout out to Janita, who was recently honored as Code Compliance Officer of the Year. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And how long have you been with us here at Norman?
I've been here for 31 years. I've been a code officer for 28.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll talk a little bit more about how much you must love your job then.
Great.
So let's hop right in here. So whoever wants to take the first question, can you just let us know what the average kind of day-to-day looks like as a code compliance officer?
Well, there are 4 of us out in the field, and so we have our areas that are assigned to us. So we patrol those areas regularly, proactively looking for code violations. We also are inspecting complaints that we've received from citizens calling into our office or to the Action Center. We also have a lot of interaction with citizens either on their properties or by answering their phone calls, voice messages, and returning emails. We have a lot of interaction with our citizens after we've been out doing some of this proactive work or code enforcement work. But we also are researching ownership each day. We have to research the legal documents and ownership utility records to know who to send our notices to. So there's a lot of data entry, a lot of time in the office as well, or sitting at the computer in our vehicles doing a lot of work like that too. So,
okay. So I heard you say there are 4 folks in your division. Is that right?
4 inspectors, 1 supervisor, and 1 admin tech. Yes.
Okay, that's a lot of ground to cover for that amount of staff, and so I think we comment often on the show about how we do a lot with a lean staff at Norman.
Yes, that's true.
So when folks call in a concern, is it tended to immediately, or what does the timeline or process look like?
A lot of that depends on the type of violation that it is. Anything that we abate or our contractors can abate basically requires by state statute and city ordinance we have to give them a minimum of 10 days to comply once the notice is given.
And abate basically means like resolve.
And abate means to resolve the problem. If it's tall weeds, it's mowing. If it's, household furniture, appliances, or junk, trash, and debris, then it's cleaning that up.
Got it.
It could be securing unsecured structures. It could be, vegetation, be it trees, bushes, whatever that may be obstructing pedestrian traffic on the sidewalk or vehicular traffic in the street. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we get, wind or a lot of rain, and especially at the time of year when everything's green, tree limbs start dropping. And so what happens is they'll drop down, and then you'll have your vehicles like sanitation trucks, embark transit buses, those kinds of things that are getting hit, at the top with tree limbs and stuff. And so then we'll notify the property owners whose trees are causing the problem to, trim it up, trim it back, whatever's necessary. And our contractors would do that if they did not. So that's kind of how that works. And like I said, it depends on the violation. There are things like, if somebody needs to make some repairs to the outside of their house, like soffits, eaves, where there's rotting wood, and maybe they need to paint because the paint's peeling. Those kinds of things, they're going to be given, at least 30 to 60 days, maybe more, depending on what's going on, and also depending on the time of year. Mm-hmm. And but we'll work closely with the property owners to get things resolved. Our deadlines aren't necessarily, set in stone. Basically, we just want people to communicate with us. Right. So if you get, in our letters when we send our notices out, they'll have the inspector's name, their email address, and their direct line phone number for contact to establish that communication. Because normally whenever we send a notice out, we have nothing but their address. We have no idea what their phone number is. We have no idea what their email address is. So it's dependent and incumbent upon the person that receives the notice to contact us. But, we just want compliance. We're not out there to punish anybody. We just want it taken care of. And we prefer that they do it and not us have to step in with a citation or send a work order to an abatement crew to go out and take care of the problem. So, basically, if people will communicate with us, and we provide the means in those notices that we send out. And basically it's, if somebody calls and say it's high weeds, and, we have to start somewhere. So, we're going to tell them they have a 10-day deadline. We even have it in our software. We do an extra day. We do 11 days just so that they have the full 10 days to get it taken care of. But they'll call us, a couple days or whatever before the reinspection is due and say, hey, my lawnmower, I started mowing, my lawnmower broke. It's at the shop. I need the next weekend to be able to get it out. Get it fixed, get it back, and mow. And we'll work with people as long as the timelines are reasonable, regardless of what it is, whether it's painting a house or mowing the weeds or cleaning up junk and debris or appliances or furniture or whatever. If they'll just communicate with us, we'll work with them on it as long as what they're requesting on timeline is reasonable.
Right. So the communication aspect is just really important here.
It is key. Communication is key because, a lot of people tend to think, that's the deadline and I have to do it by then and there's no movement. Well, we will, as long as if you'll communicate with us and tell us what's going on, we'll work with you as long as it's reasonable. I mean, obviously, if you have tall weeds and say, well, I'm in France on vacation all summer and I'm,
right.
And so I'm not going to be able to do all, well, that's not going to work. But, it's like, hey, I've been sick for a few days. I need a few more days to get this accomplished or whatever. Yeah, we'll work with you on that because we would rather, the property owner or the occupant or whoever take care of it themselves rather than us have to do it. And, and ultimately that's just better for everyone. And so communication is key. They'll just communicate. We can get a lot of problems solved with a little heartache.
Sure. Well, that seems fair to me. So on average, do you know how many calls you all take, maybe week to week or month to month?
Yeah, basically it's, because we work proactively, more than 50% of the caseloads are proactive that the inspector has done. So it's less than 50% that's complaints that's called in. But roughly about 200 cases a week, about 800 a month, and about 10,000 a year.
Oh my!
Is about where we're at on that. And there are some that we're working it proactively, but the neighbors don't know that, so they may call us and say, hey, my neighbor at this address, their weeds are 2 feet tall. And it's like, well, good news, the inspector's already found it, and so we've already got an open case on that, and we're working on it. Okay. So that works out. We really enjoy when they call and we can tell them we're already on it, whether it's they call in or whether it's from the action center. Yeah, we're already aware of that. But I mean, there's 193.6 square miles of city limits in Norman. We got 4 active inspectors and me as one supervisor. And, it takes a lot of time to cover areas. So, we do still appreciate and want people to call in complaints because we may not have found that one yet.
Sure.
So, please don't stop the complaints just because, they might already be working it. Yeah, go ahead and please let us know if we are. We'll tell you, hey, we have an open case on that. Great. And so we're already in that process or, no, we didn't know about that and we'll have an inspector check on it. So.
And there's multiple ways to, call those in or communicate with you all. You mentioned the Action Center, so you can call or fill out the web form or send an email or call your office directly. All of that information's online at normanok.gov. I'm not sure how you keep up with so many calls and cases, but it sounds like some real heroes work to me. So thank you for what you do.
We also have an online portal where complaints directly can be submitted to us as well, in addition to all those other avenues you mentioned.
Awesome. All right. Good deal. So we just congratulated Janita on the topmost award in the state, but we should brag on this entire team for just a moment. I know that we have a legacy of the best and brightest in terms of code enforcement, with several of our staff taking home prestigious awards and honors for the jobs that they do. So what would you say is key to succeeding in these roles?
I would say trying to remain positive and to remain calm. Oftentimes we're dealing with upset citizens, so just remaining calm. But we have a great team here. We all can vent to one another if we need to, if we've had a rough day. But I think, making the positive impact in the community is rewarding for us. Driving down streets and areas and seeing them cleaned up after we've come through and done some of our enforcement. It's nice to see the impact that we've made on the neighborhoods. And, our goal is to try to keep things healthy, safe for the citizens of Norman. And so that's probably what I would say.
Okay. And I did have a question too. I come from a community that did not have a lot of HOAs or homeowners associations. So what's the dynamic there with code compliance at the city of Norman and then HOAs? I mean, do you encourage people to kind of report through HOAs if their neighborhood has one of those, or can they call you directly, or what's that look like for you?
Well, it can go either way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes what happens is you'll have residents in a community that has an active homeowners association, and they'll contact their HOA about it. And a lot of times the HOAs will, give a notice or put a note on the door or something about the issue that's in violation of their covenants and restrictions. If they don't do anything about it, if it's something that also happens to violate city ordinance, then a lot of times the HOAs will call us and say, their weeds have been out of control. We told them about it. They haven't done anything. So we're going to turn it into you guys for enforcement action on that. HOA covenants and restrictions can be a lot more stringent than what city ordinance is. So if it's something that's not a violation of city ordinance, but it is a violation of covenants and restrictions, that's totally up to the HOA to enforce that, and the city's unable to do anything like that. They may have, an HOA may have a covenant restriction against any accessory structures, so you can't have a storage shed in your backyard. And so, the city of Norman does, they allow that, but the covenants and restrictions of a particular HOA may not allow it. And so that's completely up to the HOA to enforce those issues that are not a violation of city ordinance.
Got it.
So that's kind of how that works.
Okay, good to know. So what would you say your favorite part about the job is?
Well, I enjoy working with the interaction with all of the citizens. That's very rewarding. But we work with a lot of other city departments, practically all of them, it seems. But we work very closely with the police and the fire department. Line maintenance, sanitation. We work with them quite a bit. But we do a lot of inspections, annual inspections with the fire inspectors. So we go out to the sororities and fraternities and hotels and bed and breakfasts, and we do all those inspections together so that we can issue an annual permit from the city of Norman. But then we also do, on our own, we also do the short-term rental inspections. That's a fairly new program that we have here at the city. So the Airbnbs and the VRBOs, things like that. We issue an annual permit to those and inspect those annually as well. So,
all right. I totally understand and agree with kind of working across the board with all the city departments. We're lucky and blessed to be able to do that, Bryce and I, here in communications, and learn about the jobs of everybody just with the podcast. And so understand where you're coming from there. So we hear a lot about tall grass and weeds. It was mentioned a couple times already, junk vehicles, that sort of thing. What's something that maybe is less routine that your team can often may come across or deal with?
Well, there's zoning violations, an improper use. So in a residential area, somebody is, say, operating a barber shop out of their garage. Well, that's a home occupation that's actually specifically prohibited by zoning ordinance. Okay. And so, there's those kinds of things.
So zoning kind of, give us a little bit of background on zoning. I mean, it kind of just dictates what you can do in certain areas. Is that correct?
Yes. Basically, what the zoning does is, depending on what is like residential, it'll list, okay, here's the uses that's allowed in residential. And then it'll go on to say, here's a special use list you can do if you go to the Planning Commission and obtain a special use in this zoning district.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of things that goes like some things that require a special use. Like before we changed our municipal ordinances to allow, say, a medical marijuana dispensaries, they would have to get a special use first to be able to do that. Well, now that's been the zoning ordinance has been modified and that's just an example. But it's been modified to allow that in specific zoning areas. So there's a lot of things that's there. It's like maybe a church or a school, depending on what the zoning is, they may have to get a special use to be able to exist there. And so, to apply for special use, you have to go to the Planning Commission. Then after it gets past the Planning Commission, it would go to council for a council vote to allow something for a special use in a specific zoning district. So that's kind of how that works.
We also utilize the International Property Maintenance Code here. We have adopted that. So that allows us to address issues with structures, residential or commercial. So oftentimes we're going into residential properties. The tenant maybe is having an issue with the landlord not repairing things. And so often we're contacted to go in and make an inspection. And then we work with the property owner or the manager and try to address those issues and get those problems resolved for the tenants that are living there. But that can be tricky sometimes. We're also asking property owners to maintain their structures. So broken windows, we're asking them to replace those and things like that. Hoarding issues can be sensitive and can be tricky. But those are issues that we try to tackle gently, I would say,
And I mean, we've talked a lot about the what and the when, but why is this important? Why is zoning important? Why is code compliance important?
Well, I feel like it's to make, as I said before, a positive impact on the community to help. The health, safety, and welfare of our citizens is important to us, and that's really why we're here, why we do this job. I've heard a lot of other code officers in the state mention that code enforcement or code compliance in their community is an economic development tool. Where businesses are less likely to want to come to a community that has a lot of violations, a lot of damaged, dilapidated, vacant, abandoned structures,
right,
or tall grass and trash. So, that's our reasoning, I would say.
Sure. I've actually read a couple studies on that, and that makes complete sense. So ultimately, what would you all like folks to know about code compliance here in Norman?
A lot of this we covered previously, and one thing you mentioned at the very beginning of this podcast was sign permit review. And so we do about 450 of those a year as well. And that's anywhere from, billboards along the interstate or the tall ground signs, pylon type signs that the businesses have that are close to the interstate. And then just a wall sign, above the entry on the wall of a business. And then temporary signs. Temporary signs also require a permit. Basically if it's visible from the street or public street or sidewalk, and its intent is to draw people in, even if it's temporary, it requires a permit. And a lot of people don't realize that they need a permit for a temporary sign when they put out like a feather flag or a yard sign or something like that to draw attention to their business. And the other thing is that none of it can be in the right of way. And a lot of businesses will go out and put it right out, in the grass right next to the curb. Well, it's in the right of way. It's illegal. It can't be there.
Right.
It has to be, and essentially behind the sidewalk is usually pretty safe as far as not being in the right of way. Generally, most of the time, a lot of property lines, not all, but a lot, go to the inside edge of the sidewalk or close to it. So basically, the rule of thumb is, when you have a sign, number one, you're going to need a permit to put out a temporary sign. And number two, it can't be in the right of way. So make sure it's behind the sidewalk. And generally, that'll cover that. So, and we do we remove a lot of signs in the rights of way.
Yeah, and you talked about some of the temporary signage and stuff like that. I don't know if it varies as far as the type of signage that you have, but what is I'll see signage for an election or a sale or something like that, and then that time has passed, so folks need to go back and pick up that signage, right? So what's the timeline like on that?
Well, it's a little bit different. Political signs are a little bit different because it's political. So it's a little bit different than, somebody advertising a yard sale because they're doing a garage sale at their house. Technically, when you have a garage sale, the only place you can legally put a sign is on your property where the sale is occurring, and it can't be anywhere else. A lot of times people will go out and they'll put signs with an arrow or something, at the intersection closest to their house or whatever. And those are all illegal. And a lot of times, it depends on what's going on, but, we may end up removing those. But if they put those out, the big thing is make sure you go back and take them back up.
Right.
If we haven't got to them yet, to grab them and throw them away, just pick them back up. Especially if you plan on using them again in the future, clean up your own mess. And, otherwise we'll end up picking it up eventually and throwing it away. So.
Yeah, that's good to know. I'm sure that, sharing knowledge is probably just a really big part of what you do day to day. Because as you said, folks just may not know.
Very true.
Right.
Now, I even though we are proactive in our enforcement, I always like to tell citizens that there's only 4 of us to cover this area out in the field, and so we're not in every neighborhood or on every street every week all the time. So we do rely on citizens to help submit these complaints or call in and just inquire. Are you already working this property? Because it's helpful for us, and since we can't be everywhere all the time. But we do, as Kelvin said, the majority of our work truly is proactive. Certainly in my area it is, but we do rely on the citizens to help. So that's very helpful when they call and either through the Action Center or to our office directly and submit complaints.
Yes, the citizens are your eyes and ears.
They are.
They can't be everywhere, right?
Right.
Awesome.
Well, and it's a community effort. We're the ones that's being used for enforcement to try to help get these problems solved. Basically we're problem solvers, but we need the community to help us with that for sure. And, when we send out notices for violations, 95% of the people comply voluntarily, with the notice of violation. So you've only got that 5% that we either have to abate or file charges on or something like that. So, the compliance rate's good. People are pretty good about complying for the most part. And, and it just makes for a safer, healthier, a better standard of living. Quality of life is better, and it keeps property values up so that people want to sell their house. They don't want some horrid thing right next to them. Because it could affect their property values. And so, if it's violations, that's why we try to work all these to keep people's property values up, keep the quality of life up for people, and just help out and make Norman a nice place to visit and to live.
As a Norman homeowner, I thoroughly appreciate what you all do. So thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. So questions or commentary about On West Gray can be sent into publicaffairs@normanok.gov. Shout out to our producer and editor, Mr. Bryce Holland of the City of Norman Communications Office. Don't forget to celebrate Lakes Appreciation and Parks and Recreation Month in July. Log on to normanok.gov to learn more about all of the fun lined up. Janita, Kelvin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time, stay engaged, stay informed, and always remember to cast your ballot. I'm Tiffany Verska. Thank you for tuning in to On West Gray.